The contractions were coming faster now, each wave of pain shooting through Amara's body like lightning as she gripped the hospital bed rails. Her water had broken an hour ago in their Lagos penthouse, and now here, she was at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, alone except for the midwife checking her dilation. "Where is your husband?" the midwife asked, concern etched across her weathered face. Before Amara could answer, the delivery room door burst open. But instead of relief flooding her features, horror took its place. There stood Chaik, her husband of 3 years, his expensive Armani suit wrinkled, lipstick smeared across his collar, and the unmistakable scent of another woman's perfume clinging to him like guilt. "Chaik, thank God you're—" Amara's words died in her throat as a woman appeared behind him. Tall, light-skinned, wearing a form-fitting red dress that screamed expensive taste. The woman's hand was possessively wrapped around Chaik's arm. "What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from." "Who is this?" Amara gasped, another contraction making her double over in pain. Chaik's jaw tightened, his dark eyes cold as granite. "Amara, meet Kemi. My new wife." The words hit Amara harder than any physical blow. The heart monitor beside her bed began beeping frantically as her blood pressure spiked. "You're what?" "Chaik, I'm having your baby right now." "Actually," Kemi spoke for the first time, her voice honey-sweet but laced with venom. "He's having our baby. I'm 2 months pregnant." She placed a manicured hand on her still flat stomach, a diamond wedding ring catching the harsh hospital lights. Amara's world tilted on its axis. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of trying to conceive, and now this. "You married her? When? How?" "Last week in Abuja," Chaik said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "It was a small ceremony. Her father is Senator Adebayo, and the connections, well, they're exactly what my construction company needs." Another contraction ripped through Amara, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. "Your baby is being born, Chaik." "Our baby. That's exactly why we're here." Chaik pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "I need you to sign these papers." Amara's vision blurred with tears as she tried to focus on the documents. "What are these?" "Divorce papers. And a custody agreement giving me full rights to the child." The midwife stepped forward, her voice sharp with indignation. "Sir, this woman is in active labor. She cannot sign legal documents right now." Kemi laughed, the sound cruel and calculating. "Oh, but she will. You see, Amara, Chaik has been funding your medical school education, this pregnancy, everything. And according to Nigerian law, what's his is his, including the child you're carrying." Amara's mind raced through their relationship. How Chaik had insisted on managing all their finances. How he'd encouraged her to quit her job at the bank to focus on medical school. How he'd isolated her from her family in Enugu, claiming they were beneath his social status. "I won't sign," Amara whispered through gritted teeth. Chaik's expression hardened. "Then you'll give birth in a government hospital. I've already had you removed from our health insurance. This private room, the specialized doctors I arranged, it all disappears in the next 5 minutes if you don't sign." "You can't do this," Amara screamed as another contraction peaked. "I can, and I am." Chaik checked his Rolex. "Sign the papers, Amara. You have nothing. No job, no money, no family support. I'm being generous by even letting you see the child occasionally." Kemi moved closer to the bed, her voice dropping to a whisper only Amara could hear. "He told me all about you. The little village girl who thought she could marry above her station. Did you really think someone like Chaik would stay with someone like you forever?" The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Amara looked at the man she'd loved, the man whose child was fighting to enter the world, and saw a stranger. "Get out. Not without your signature," Chaik said firmly. "Get out." Amara screamed with such force that hospital security appeared at the door. The midwife looked between the security guards and Chaik. "Sir, you need to leave. This is causing distress to the patient." Chaik's eyes flashed dangerously.
"Fine.
"But Amara, when you change your mind, and you will, Remember that I gave you a choice." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and we'll be moving into the penthouse tomorrow. You have until then to collect your things." As they left, Amara heard Kemi's laughter echoing down the hospital corridor. The sound mixed with her own sobs as another contraction began, this one bringing her son closer to a world where his father had already abandoned him. The midwife squeezed her hand. "Focus on your breathing, dear. This baby needs you strong." But Amara's mind was elsewhere, remembering something Chaik didn't know. Something no one knew except her late grandmother and the family lawyer in Enugu. A secret that had been locked away for 25 years, waiting for her to claim it. As her son's head crowned, bringing new life into the world, Amara made a silent vow. Chaik had taken everything from her tonight, but he had no idea what he was about to lose in return. The midwife's voice seemed to come from far away. "One more push, and you'll meet your baby." Amara pushed with all her strength, bringing her son into the world just as her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Amara, this is Williams & Associates legal firm. We've been trying to reach you regarding your grandmother's estate. Please contact us immediately. It's urgent. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this." What do you think Amara should do next? Comment below. 3 days later, Amara sat in the cramped waiting room of Williams & Associates legal firm in Victoria Island, her newborn son Emeka sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had his father's strong jawline but her gentle eyes that had cried themselves dry over the past 72 hours. She'd spent those 3 days in a cheap hotel near the hospital, using the last of her savings after Chaik had indeed frozen their joint accounts and changed the locks on their penthouse. Every item of clothing she owned now fit into 2 suitcases, and the formula for Emeka was running low. "Mrs. Okoro?" A middle-aged man in a well-tailored agbada emerged from the inner office. "I'm Barrister Williams. Thank you for coming." Amara followed him into an office lined with law books and certificates. Through the window, she could see the bustling streets of Lagos Island, where life continued normally while hers had fallen apart. "First, my condolences on your grandmother's passing," Williams began, settling behind his mahogany desk. "Mom Ngozi was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," Amara whispered. "But I don't understand why you're contacting me now. Grandmother died 5 years ago." Williams opened a thick file. "That's precisely why I'm reaching out. Your grandmother's will contain specific instructions. You are to be contacted only when you turn 25, or if you face significant hardship. Based on the news reports about your situation, I felt it was time." Amara's heart sank. The domestic betrayal had made the gossip blogs, complete with photos of Chaik and Kemi leaving the hospital together. What news reports? The divorce, the hospital incident. "Mrs. Okoro, I need to ask, are you in financial distress?" "I have enough for maybe 2 more days of hotel fees," Amara admitted, her cheeks burning with shame. Williams nodded solemnly, then opened a folder that made Amara's breath catch. Inside were property deeds, bank statements, and share certificates with numbers that seemed impossible. "Your grandmother, Ngozi Okafor, was not just the village seamstress you knew," Williams began carefully. "In 1962, she invested in Lagos real estate with her late husband. What started as 3 plots of land in Victoria Island is now worth approximately $50 million US. The words hung in the air like a mirage. Amara blinked hard, convinced she was hallucinating from exhaustion and stress. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" $50 million, Mrs. Okoro. Your grandmother owned 17 buildings across Lagos and Abuja, plus shares in 3 major corporations. She lived simply by choice, not necessity." Emeka stirred in her arms, making small baby noises that somehow grounded her in reality. "That's impossible. Grandmother lived in a small house in Enugu. She made clothes by hand." She did indeed, but she also quietly became one of Nigeria's wealthiest women. Williams pulled out a photograph from the 1980s showing a younger version of her grandmother shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside a gleaming office building. She was a founding investor in Goldstein Properties, the company that built half of Victoria Island. Amara stared at the photo, seeing her grandmother's familiar smile, but in a context that made no sense. Why didn't she ever tell me? According to her letters, she wanted you to make your own way first, to know your own strength before inheriting hers. Williams paused. She also left specific instructions about your husband. What about Chike? Williams pulled out a handwritten letter in her grandmother's familiar script. She had him investigated when you got engaged. She knew about his debts, his affairs, even his plan to use you for social climbing. This letter was to be given to you if he ever betrayed you. With trembling hands, Amara unfolded the letter. Her grandmother's words seemed to speak from beyond the grave. My dear Amara, if you are reading this, then that boy has shown his true colors. I am sorry I could not protect you from the pain, but I knew you needed to see his character yourself. You are stronger than you know, my child. Use what I have left you not for revenge, but for justice. The weak prey on those they think have nothing. Show him what it means to have everything. Tears fell onto the paper as Amara read the final line. Remember, a woman's greatest weapon is not what she can destroy, but what she can build. Make me proud. There's more, Williams continued gently. 3 months ago, your husband's company took a major loan to fund a new construction project. The lending company? Goldstein Properties. One of the companies you now control. Amara's head snapped up. You mean? Chike owes you 12 million naira, with payments due monthly. He has no idea who the real owner is. All transactions go through our firm. Williams smiled for the first time. And there's something else. His new wife, Kemi Adebayo. What about her? She works as a junior architect at Goldstein Properties. Has for 2 years. Her salary, her career, her father's political connections that helped her get the job, they all trace back to companies you now own. The irony was so profound that Amara almost laughed. Almost. So Chike married his boss's boss's boss, and he doesn't even know it. Precisely. Williams leaned forward. Mrs. Okoro, you have choices to make. You could call in his loan immediately, bankrupting his company. You could fire Ms. Adebayo. You could even buy the building where they're living and evict them. Amara looked down at Emeka, her son who would never want for anything, never face the poverty she'd just escaped. But her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Use what I have left you not for revenge, but for justice. What would you advise? She asked. Williams's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. I would advise patience. Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, we restructure your assets, establish your presence in Lagos society, and when the time is right. He paused dramatically. We remind them that in Lagos, reputation is everything, and scandal is the quickest way to lose it. And Emeka? With your resources, you can provide him with the best of everything while building a legal case for full custody. Rich women rarely lose custody battles in Nigeria, especially when the father's finances are questionable. As if summoned by their conversation, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from Chike. Have you reconsidered the divorce papers? Kemi is pregnant, and we need to move forward. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Amara showed the message to Williams, who chuckled darkly. Mrs. Okoro, I think it's time your husband learned that some people are harder to get rid of than others. What's the first step? Williams pulled out a business card. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into Goldstein Properties as the new owner. And Ms. Kemi Adebayo is going to get the surprise of her life. But what do you think happens when Amara shows up to claim her empire? Comment your thoughts on the betrayal, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. The Goldstein Properties building gleamed like a monument to success in the heart of Victoria Island. Amara stood across the street, adjusting the Hermes handbag that had belonged to her grandmother and watching employees filter through the glass doors. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, understated wealth rather than flashy display, while Emeka dozed in his carrier, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Mrs. Okoro, are you ready? Barrister Williams asked, checking his watch. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Amara nodded, her resolve hardening with each step toward the building. 3 weeks had passed since learning about her inheritance, 3 weeks of careful planning and legal maneuvering. Today, she would finally step out of the shadows. The lobby was a symphony of marble and gold, with Goldstein Properties logo prominently displayed behind the reception desk. Yes, Amara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Let's go. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. When the doors opened, they were greeted by the executive secretary, Mrs. Adunni Oligok, a dignified woman in her 50s who had managed the top floor for over 2 decades. Welcome, Mrs. Okoro, she said with genuine warmth. The board is assembled and waiting. May I say, your grandmother would be very proud. You knew her? I was her secretary for 15 years before she officially retired and put the company in trust. Mrs. Oligok smiled conspiratorially. She used to say you would come back to claim your birthright when the time was right. The boardroom doors opened to reveal 12 executives around a polished conference table. At the head sat Mr. Badamosi, the company's managing director, who rose immediately upon seeing her. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, I present to you Mrs. Amara Okoro, daughter of the late Mrs. Ngozi Okafor and majority shareholder of Goldstein Properties. The formal introductions felt surreal, but Amara maintained her composure as each board member welcomed her. These people controlled billions of naira in assets, and now she controlled them. Mrs. Okoro, Mr. Badamosi began once everyone was seated. We've prepared a comprehensive overview of your holdings. Beyond Goldstein Properties, you own shares in Zenith Bank, controlling interests in 2 oil service companies and real estate across Nigeria worth approximately 8 billion naira. What about current projects? Amara asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Amara interrupted gently. I'll go alone. But first, I understand we have several junior architects on staff. I'd like to meet them. 20 minutes later, Amara found herself in the architectural department, watching Kemi Adebayo through the glass walls of a conference room. The woman who had destroyed her marriage was presenting blueprints to a small team, completely unaware that her employer's new owner was observing every gesture. She's talented, admitted the department head, Mr. 2 years. Her father, Senator Adebayo, made some calls. She's competent, but not exceptional. I see. And her current assignment? She's the junior architect on the Lekki Gardens project, working directly with the contractor. The irony was so perfect it almost felt scripted. Mr. Fashola, I'd like you to arrange a meeting with Ms. Adebayo. Tell her the new owner wants to discuss the Lekki project. When would you like to schedule it? Amara checked her watch.
Now.
5 minutes later, Kemi walked into the conference room with a confident smile, clearly expecting to impress whoever this mysterious new owner might be. The smile died the moment she saw Amara sitting at the head of the table, Emeka sleeping peacefully in his carrier beside her. Hello, Kemi, Amara said quietly. Please have a seat. Kemi's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, confusion, fear, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. What are you doing here? I work here. Or rather, I own here. Amara gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down. We need to talk. This is impossible, Kemi whispered, but she sat. You're nobody. You're just a medical student with no money, no connections. No family, you mean? Amara opened the folder in front of her. Funny thing about family, Kemi. Sometimes they surprise you. My grandmother, for instance. Did you know she built this company from nothing? Started with 3 plots of land and a dream. Kemi's eyes darted to the documents in front of Amara: property deeds, share certificates, bank statements that told the story of a fortune decades in the making. You're lying, Kemi said, but her voice shook. Am I? Mr. Fashola, could you please confirm for Ms. Adebayo, who owns Goldstein Properties? Mrs. Amara Okoro owns 68% of the company, Fashola said from the doorway. She inherited the shares from her grandmother 3 weeks ago. The blood drained from Kemi's face. This changes nothing. I'm still married to Chaik. I'm still pregnant with his child. Are you? Amara asked mildly. Because according to this medical report from Lagos University Teaching Hospital, you suffered a miscarriage 2 weeks ago. The same day, coincidentally, that you increased your work hours here and took on additional responsibilities. Kemi's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. How did you? Money opens doors, Kemi. It also opens medical records, bank statements, and employment files. Amara leaned forward. You lied to Chaik about the pregnancy to keep him interested, just like you lied about your father's connections getting you this job. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Amara slid a photograph across the table, the same image Williams had shown her of her grandmother with the company's founding investors. Your father knew my grandmother. He helped her secure some of her early real estate deals in exchange for political favors. The job recommendation he gave you? It was based on an old friendship with a woman he thought was dead. The conference room fell silent except for Emika's soft breathing. Kemi stared at the photograph, her carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. What do you want? She whispered. Justice, Amara said simply. For me, for my son, and for my grandmother's legacy that you've been unwittingly benefiting from for 2 years. Are you going to fire me? Amara smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt since the hospital. Oh, Kemi, firing you would be far too easy. No, I have much more interesting plans for you. She stood, gathering Emika and her papers. You're going to continue working on the Lecky Gardens project. In fact, you're going to work very closely with Chaik to ensure it meets all our specifications. And when it's finished, you're both going to attend the grand opening as my honored guests. Why would you want us there? Amara paused at the door. Because that's when Lagos society will learn exactly who Chaik Okechukwu really married, who he abandoned, and what it cost him. As she left, she heard Kemi's strangled sob behind her. But Amara felt no satisfaction, not yet. The real justice would come when Chaik learned the truth. Her phone buzzed with a message from her husband. The Lecky project is behind schedule. I need more money from the investor. Can you talk to whoever's in charge? Amara typed back. I'll see what I can do. If you're loving this revenge plot, hit that like button and share this story with someone who appreciates justice being served. What do you think Amara has planned for the grand opening? Let me know in the comments. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the Lecky construction site as Amara's black Mercedes pulled up to the temporary site office. Through the tinted windows, she could see Chaik in his hard hat and work clothes, arguing with a group of construction workers about delayed materials. His voice carried across the dusty lot, filled with frustration and barely contained panic. Mrs. Okoro, her new driver, Emika Sr., named after her son and fiercely loyal since learning who she really was, opened her door. Are you sure you want to go in alone? Quite sure, Amara replied, adjusting little Emika in his carrier. At 6 weeks old, her son had become her constant companion and her greatest source of strength. But stay close. The site office was a cramped trailer filled with blueprints, coffee-stained paperwork, and the smell of masculine desperation. Chaik looked up from his desk as she entered, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally a kind of weary resignation. What are you doing here, Amara? I came to see how my investment is progressing, she said calmly, settling into the chair across from his cluttered desk. Chaik laughed bitterly. Your investment? Amara, I know you're angry about the divorce, but showing up at my job site isn't going to change anything. You're right. It won't change the past. Amara pulled out a folder from her handbag. But it might change the future. Tell me, Chaik, how much do you know about your primary investor? What kind of question is that? I deal with Goldstein Properties through their lawyers. It's standard business practice. Amara pretended to study the documents in her folder. And your loan payments? How current are you? Chaik's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. Actually, it's entirely my business. She slid a payment schedule across his desk. You're 6 weeks behind on a 12 million naira loan. Your contract stipulates that any delays in payment or construction schedule give the lender the right to call in the full amount immediately. How the hell do you know about my loan terms? Because I'm the lender, Chaik. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Chaik stared at her, then at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at her face. That's impossible. Is it? You never wondered why a struggling medical student could afford designer handbags and expensive skincare? Why my grandmother's funeral drew politicians and business leaders from across Nigeria? Amara's voice remained steady, but inside, her heart was pounding. You were so busy looking down on my family that you never looked close enough to see what was actually there. Chaik grabbed the folder, his hands shaking as he read through the documents. Bank statements, property deeds, corporate filings, all bearing the name Ngozi Okafor, with inheritance documents transferring everything to Amara Okoro. This can't be real, he whispered. $50 million, Chaik. That's what my grandmother left me. The woman you called a village seamstress was one of the wealthiest people in Nigeria. Amara stood, Emeka stirring slightly in his sleep. She built an empire while you were still learning to walk. If this is true, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know. Grandmother wanted me to make my own way first, to understand my own strength before inheriting hers. Amara paused at the door. She also wanted to see what kind of man you really were. Turns out, her instincts were perfect. Chaik rose from his chair, knocking over a coffee cup in his haste. Amara, wait. If you're telling the truth, then we can work this out. The divorce, the custody arrangement, we can renegotiate everything. Can we? What about Kemi? What about your new marriage? Kemi? Chaik's face went pale. She lost the baby, Amara. 2 weeks ago. She didn't want me to tell anyone yet, but I know. I also know she lied about being pregnant in the first place. Amara watched the realization dawn on his face. The medical records show she was never pregnant, Chaik. She fabricated the whole thing to keep you interested after you kicked me out. Chaik sank back into his chair, as if his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. No, that's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented. Would you like me to show you the hospital records? Or the fertility clinic visits she made 3 months ago when she realized she couldn't conceive quickly enough to maintain the lie? The trailer fell silent except for the sounds of construction work outside. Chaik buried his face in his hands, the weight of his choices finally crushing down on him. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice muffled. Nothing, Amara said simply. I want nothing from you anymore, Chaik. But I do want something for our son. What? I want him to grow up knowing his father isn't a coward. I want him to see that you're capable of taking responsibility for your choices. She adjusted Emeka in her arms. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish this construction project on time and on budget. You're going to pay back every naira you owe. And you're going to treat me with the respect I should have received all along. And if I don't, then I call in your loan immediately, bankrupt your company, and ensure that every construction firm in Lagos knows exactly why Okechukwu Construction failed. Amara's voice hardened. I'll also make sure everyone knows about Kemi's lies, your debts, and the fact that you abandoned your wife while she was giving birth. Chaik looked up at her with something that might have been respect for the first time in their relationship. You've changed. No, Chaik. I've just stopped pretending to be smaller than I am to make you feel bigger. She moved toward the door. You have 48 hours to bring your loan current. After that, we'll discuss revised terms for the construction contract. Revised how? You'll be working directly with your new project supervisor. She's a junior architect at Goldstein Properties, very familiar with the site specifications. Amara smiled coldly. Her name is Kemi Adebayo. I'm sure you two will work beautifully together. As she left the trailer, Amara heard Chaik's strangled curse behind her. But she felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that justice was finally beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know who you are now. We need to talk. K. Amara typed back. My office. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. The game was truly beginning, and for the first time since that horrible night in the hospital, Amara felt like she was winning. But as her car pulled away from the construction site, she noticed another vehicle following them. In the rearview mirror, she could see Kemi behind the wheel, her face twisted with rage and desperation. Some people, Amara thought, never knew when to accept defeat. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get even more intense. What do you think Kemi is planning? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The Goldstein Properties executive floor was unusually quiet at 8:45 a.m. when Amara arrived for her meeting with Kemi. Mrs. Oligoke had thoughtfully arranged for a nanny to watch Emeka in the adjacent office, giving Amara the freedom to focus entirely on the confrontation ahead. She's been here since 7:30, Mrs. Oligoke reported quietly, pacing in the lobby like a caged animal. Security had to ask her twice to stop making phone calls so loudly. Amara nodded, settling behind her grandmother's massive mahogany desk, the same desk from which Mom Ngozi had built her empire. The morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated family photos Amara had brought from storage, her grandmother with politicians, business leaders, and foreign investors spanning 4 decades. At exactly 9 a.m., Kemi was escorted in. She looked haggard, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her designer purse. "Sit," Amara said without looking up from the file she was reviewing. "I prefer to stand." "I wasn't asking." Amara's voice carried the quiet authority she'd learned from watching her grandmother command rooms full of powerful men. "Sit down, Kemi." Reluctantly, Kemi settled into the chair across from the desk. "You can't do this to me." "Do what, exactly?" "Destroy my life. My career. I know what you're planning." "Do you?" Amara finally looked up, her expression serene. "No, they're not. Revenge is personal and emotional. Consequences are business." Amara turned back to face her. "And you, my dear, have been very bad for business." Kemi's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "I want the truth. All of it. About the fake pregnancy, about how you manipulated Chaik, about your plan to use his connections to advance your career." "Actually, you do." Amara returned to her desk, pulling out a thick legal folder. "You see, when I inherited my grandmother's assets, I also inherited her legal team. Very thorough people. They've spent the last month investigating everyone connected to my personal life." She slid a series of photographs across the desk. They showed Kemi entering various medical offices, meeting with men in expensive suits, and having intimate dinners with Chaik dating back 6 months before Amara's pregnancy. "These photos tell an interesting story," Amara continued. "They show you've been planning this for a long time. The fake pregnancy was just the final move in a very calculated game." Kemi's face had gone completely pale. "You had me followed? I had my life investigated. You just happened to be in it." Amara opened another file. "Did you know that 3 of the men you had dinner with during your affair with Chaik were my business partners? They reported back to me without even knowing who you were." Kemi's hands were visibly shaking now. "Contractor payments for work that was never done. Expense reports for business dinners that were actually personal dates with my husband." Kemi stared at the documents, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "You can't prove I took that money." "I don't have to prove it. I just have to report it." Amara leaned back in her chair. "Embezzlement is a serious crime in Nigeria, Kemi. Especially when it involves amounts over 100,000 naira. That's a mandatory minimum of 7 years in prison." "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I? You destroyed my marriage, lied to my husband, and tried to steal my child. You've been stealing from my company for 2 years while sleeping with my husband. What exactly do you think I wouldn't dare to do?" Kemi suddenly stood, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "I'm leaving. You can't keep me here." "You're right, I can't. But I can have security escort you from the building and ensure that every architectural firm in Lagos knows exactly why you were terminated." "My father will." "Your father will what?" "Protect a daughter who's been caught embezzling? Who fabricated medical records to trap a married man." Amara's voice remained calm, but steel had entered her tone. "Senator Adebayo has worked very hard to build his reputation. Do you really think he'll risk it for someone who's brought nothing but scandal to his name?" Kemi sank back into her chair, the fight leaving her body. "What do you want?" "I want you to resign from Goldstein Properties today. I want you to sign a confession about the embezzlement and agree to pay back every naira you stole." And I want you to tell Chike the truth about everything. The fake pregnancy, the affairs, the money. And if I do all that, then I won't press criminal charges. I won't destroy your father's political career. And I'll give you a reference letter that will allow you to find work somewhere outside of Lagos. You're exiling me. I'm giving you a chance to start over somewhere your lies haven't caught up with you yet. Amara stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You have until 5 p.m. today to decide. After that, I call the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and let them sort it out. Kemi rose on unsteady legs, clutching her purse like a lifeline. I never meant for things to go this far. Yes, you did. You calculated every move, every lie, every betrayal. The only thing you didn't calculate was that sometimes the people you underestimate turn out to be stronger than you imagined. As Kemi reached the door, she turned back one last time. He won't take you back, you know. Even knowing what you have, even knowing what I did, Chike will never love you the way you want him to. You're right, Amara said simply. But that's not what this is about anymore. This is about my son growing up knowing his mother is someone who fights back. After Kemi left, Amara sat in the silence of her grandmother's office, feeling the weight of power and responsibility settling on her shoulders. Through the window, she could see Lagos spreading out below her, a city of dreams and schemes, where fortunes were made and lost on the strength of one's will. Her phone buzzed with a message from Chike. Kemi just called, crying. She says you're trying to destroy her. What's going on? Amara typed back. Ask her about the money she stole. Ask her about the lies she told you. Then ask yourself if you're ready to be honest for the first time in your life. Minutes later, her phone rang. Chike's name appeared on the screen, but she let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, she answered. Is it true? His voice was hollow, defeated. Which part? All of it. The money, the pregnancy, everything. Yes. There was a long silence, then the sound of something breaking, perhaps Chike throwing his phone against a wall. I've destroyed everything, he whispered when he came back on the line. Yes, you have. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, Chike. For once in your life, start with the truth. As she hung up, Amara felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that the hardest part was still ahead. Because rebuilding trust was infinitely more difficult than destroying it, and she wasn't sure she wanted to try. But as she looked at baby Emeka sleeping peacefully in the next room, she knew one thing for certain. Her son would never wonder if his mother was strong enough to protect him. The real question was whether his father would prove worthy of redemption. What do you think Chike will do with the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic twists. 6 weeks later, the Lekki Gardens construction site had transformed from a chaotic mess into something approaching respectability. Amara walked through the nearly completed luxury development, her heels clicking on polished marble floors while Emeka dozed in his carrier, seemingly unimpressed by the multi-million naira surroundings his father had built. The units are selling faster than we anticipated, reported Mr. Badamosi, who had accompanied her on the inspection. All 50 units are either sold or under contract. And our contractor's performance? Remarkable improvement. Mr. Okachukwu has been here 16 hours a day for the past month. The project is actually ahead of schedule now. Amara nodded, unsurprised. Chike had always been capable when properly motivated, and the prospect of financial ruin was apparently excellent motivation. They emerged onto the site's main plaza just as a familiar figure approached from the construction office. Chike looked leaner than she remembered, worn down by weeks of 18-hour days and the weight of his choices. His expensive suits had been replaced by work clothes, and his hands bore the calluses of a man who'd remembered how to actually build things instead of just managing others who did. Amara, he said quietly, removing his hard hat. Thank you for coming. This is a business inspection, Chike. Nothing more. I know, but I wanted to show you something. He gestured toward the development centerpiece, a beautifully landscaped courtyard with a playground and community center. This wasn't in the original plans. What do you mean? I added it. Used my own money, my own time. I thought He paused, struggling with words that had never come easily to him. I thought children should have a place to play safely. Families should have somewhere to gather. When is this meeting supposed to happen? Tonight. At the Transcorp Hilton, 8 p.m. Amara checked her watch. It was already 3 p.m., which didn't give her much time to prepare for whatever Kemi had planned. You're not going alone, she said finally. Amara. I'm not asking, Chike. If Kemi wants to play games with my family's reputation, she'll play them with both of us present. Chike sat beside her, uncharacteristically nervous in his best suit. Baby Emeka had been left with his nanny, much to Amara's relief. Whatever Kemi had planned, it wasn't suitable for children's ears. There. Chike nodded toward the entrance. Kemi entered like she was walking onto a stage, wearing a red dress that was too bright and too tight for the venue. She'd clearly spent money she didn't have trying to project an image of success, but the effect was desperate rather than impressive. And Amara. How cozy. What do you want, Kemi? Amara asked without preamble. Straight to business. I like that. Kemi placed a manila folder on the table. I've been doing some research into your grandmother's empire. Very interesting reading. Get to the point. The point is that Mom Ngozi wasn't quite the saint you think she was. Kemi opened the folder, revealing photocopied documents. In 1987, she was investigated by the military government for currency fraud. They suspected her of moving money illegally through shell companies in London. Amara glanced at the documents, recognizing some of them from her grandmother's personal papers. These prove nothing illegal. Don't they? Because I also found records of payments to military officials. Large payments, made regularly for over a decade. Kemi's smile was vicious. Your precious grandmother built her empire by bribing government officials and manipulating currency exchange rates. Even if that were true, which it isn't, what exactly do you want? I want my job back. I want a public apology for the false accusations of embezzlement. And I want a settlement payment of 5 million naira for the emotional distress you've caused me. Chike started to speak, but Amara placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow's newspapers will carry a very interesting story about how Nigeria's newest businesswoman inherited blood money. Kemi leaned forward. Your reputation will be destroyed before you even build it. Amara studied Kemi's face, noting the slight tremor in her voice, the way her eyes couldn't quite hold steady contact. Classic signs of someone bluffing with a weak hand. You know what, Kemi? You're absolutely right. Both Kemi and Chike stared at her in shock. My grandmother did pay money to government officials, Amara continued calmly. Lots of money. Would you like to know why? What? Because she was funding schools, hospitals, road construction projects that the government promised, but never delivered. Amara pulled out her own folder, much thicker than Kemi's. Every payment you found has a corresponding receipt from a completed public works project. Kemi's confidence visibly wavered. That's impossible. Is it? My grandmother kept meticulous records, Kemi, including recordings of every meeting she had with government officials. Amara played a brief audio clip on her phone, her grandmother's voice clearly stating that funds were for a medical clinic in Enugu. She recorded everything? Kemi whispered. Everything. Including, as it happens, a conversation with Senator Adebayo from 1994 where he specifically thanks her for funding his daughter's private school education in London. Amara smiled coldly. Your education, Kemi. The blood drained from Kemi's face. You can't prove that. Your father's financial records from 1994 show no tuition payments to any London schools. But my grandmother's records show regular payments to St. Catherine's Academy for Girls, the school you attended. Amara leaned back in her seat. So let me make you a counteroffer. I don't want to hear it. You're going to hear it anyway. You're going to take your little folder of half-truths and misunderstandings, and you're going to disappear. Forever. Because if you ever attempt to blackmail me again, I'll release recordings that will end your father's political career and land him in prison for corruption. Kemi stood abruptly, grabbing her folder. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Amara's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. And Kemi, The next time you try to destroy someone, make sure you understand who you're dealing with first. As Kemi stormed out, Chaik turned to Amara with something approaching awe. You've had recordings of her father this whole time? My grandmother always said that in Lagos, information is more valuable than money. Amara gathered her things. She taught me to always know more about other people than they know about themselves. Is there anything you don't know about me? Amara looked at him for a long moment. I know you're trying to change. I know you built that playground for our son. And I know you're finally asking the right questions. What's the right question? The question isn't what I know about you, Chaik. It's what you're willing to do to become the man our son deserves as a father. As they left the hotel together, walking side by side but not touching, Amara felt the first stirring of something that might eventually become forgiveness. But first, there was a grand opening to plan, and she intended to make it a night Lagos would never forget. If you're invested in this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think should happen at the grand opening. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of betrayal and redemption. The grand opening of Lekki Gardens was designed to be the social event of the season. Under a canopy of stars and string lights, Lagos's elite mingled on manicured lawns while a traditional highlife band played softly in the background. The development's luxury units gleamed like jewels, their floor-to-ceiling windows revealing carefully staged interiors that spoke of wealth and sophistication. Amara moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations on her new venture, while internally noting which guests knew the truth about her inheritance and which still believed she was simply Chaik's abandoned wife, making a brave comeback. She wore her grandmother's emerald necklace, a piece that had attended similar gatherings for 40 years, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who owned everything in sight. Mrs. Okoro, Governor Fashola, appeared at her elbow with his wife in tow. Magnificent development. Your grandmother would be proud. Thank you, Governor. I'm simply following her blueprint. Smart woman, Mama Ngozi. She understood that real wealth comes from building things that last. His eyes twinkled with knowing amusement, unlike some people who mistake flash for substance. Amara followed his gaze across the lawn to where Senator Adebayo was holding court near the champagne fountain, his voice carrying over the gentle music as he regaled listeners with tales of his political influence. He hadn't noticed his daughter's conspicuous absence from the evening's festivities. Speaking of substance, Mrs. Fashola added quietly, I heard Kemi Adebayo took a position with a firm in Abuja. Very sudden departure. People make choices, Amara replied diplomatically. Sometimes those choices lead them exactly where they belong. Near the development's centerpiece fountain, Chaik was engaged in animated conversation with potential investors, his enthusiasm for the project genuine and infectious. He'd thrown himself into tonight's event with the same intense focus he'd applied to completing construction ahead of schedule, and the results showed in every perfectly planned detail. Mama Amara, a familiar voice called out, and Amara turned to see Mrs. Okafor, her grandmother's oldest friend, approaching with open arms. Look at you, child. You have your grandmother's eyes tonight, sharp enough to see through any nonsense. Mrs. Okafor, I'm so glad you came. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Mama Ngozi told me years ago that someday you would claim your rightful place. She said Lagos wasn't ready for what you would become. The elderly woman smiled conspiratorially. Judging by tonight, I'd say she was right. As if summoned by their conversation, a commotion near the main entrance drew everyone's attention. Dangerous. Auntie Adelaide, Amara replied, using the respectful title for elders. I wasn't sure you'd received the invitation. Oh, I received it. I also received some very interesting phone calls over the past few weeks. Adelaide's smile was sharp as a blade. It seems you've been making quite an impression on Lagos society. I've been trying to honor grandmother's legacy. Have you? Because from what I hear, you've been doing much more than that. Adelaide gestured toward the development around them. Mama Ngozi built quietly, carefully. You, on the other hand, seemed determined to make a statement. Before Amara could respond, another interruption came from an unexpected source. Chaik had appeared at her side, his face pale and tense. Amara, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves police cars and federal agents asking questions about construction permits. As if on cue, the subtle sounds of the evening were disrupted by the low rumble of approaching vehicles. Through the development's main gate, Amara could see a convoy of black SUVs with official license plates making their way up the winding drive. Ladies and gentlemen, the evening's master of ceremonies announced over the sound system, his voice carefully controlled, "We're experiencing a minor delay in tonight's program. Please continue to enjoy the refreshments while we address a small administrative matter." But the crowd had already noticed the vehicles, and conversations shifted from business deals to worried speculation. In Nigeria, unexpected visits from federal agents rarely ended well for anyone involved. "Mrs. Okoro?" A man in a crisp suit approached, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Of course, Inspector," she replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "How can I help you?" "We've received reports that some of the permits for this development were obtained through irregular channels. We need to examine your documentation." From the corner of her eye, Amara saw Adelaide Coker watching the exchange with intense interest. Chike looked ready to either run or fight, neither of which would help the situation. And somewhere in the crowd, she knew there were people hoping to see her fall just as spectacularly as she'd risen. "All of our permits are in order," Chike interjected, but the inspector's attention remained fixed on Amara. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us for questioning." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but we do need to clear up some questions about financial irregularities." Amara's mind raced through the possibilities. Someone had orchestrated this perfectly, timing the raid for maximum embarrassment, probably hoping to destroy her reputation and her business in one evening. The question was who had both the connections and the motivation to pull off something this sophisticated. "Inspector," Adelaide Coker's voice cut through the tension like a sword, "before you make any irreversible decisions, perhaps you'd like to see these documents." She produced a leather portfolio from her evening bag, handing it to the surprised inspector. As he read through the contents, his expression shifted from confidence to confusion to something approaching alarm. This changes things," he said finally. "I thought it might," Adelaide replied coolly. "Mrs. Okoro, it appears someone has been using forged documents to implicate you in crimes you didn't commit. The real question is who had access to government letterhead and official seals." Nothing enhanced one's reputation in Lagos quite like successfully facing down a government investigation, especially in front of 200 witnesses. "How did you know?" Amara asked Adelaide quietly. "Because 30 years ago, someone tried the exact same thing to your grandmother. Same forged documents, same accusations, same theatrical timing." Adelaide's eyes glittered with satisfaction. "The difference is that Mama Ngozi faced it alone. You have me." "Who is behind it this time?" Adelaide's smile was predatory. "Someone who clearly doesn't understand that in Lagos, coming for one of us means coming for all of us. And my dear, you've just passed your final test." "What test?" "The one that proves you're truly Ngozi Okafor's granddaughter. Tonight, Lagos society learned that you don't just have money, you have power. And more importantly, you have allies willing to use it." As the evening resumed its festivities, the real question was what she would do with that power next. This story is getting more intense by the chapter. What do you think Adelaide knows that we don't? Hit that like button and drop your theories in the comments. And make sure to subscribe because the final confrontation is coming up next. 3 days after the grand opening, Amara stood in her grandmother's private study, surrounded by decades of carefully preserved documents. The raid had been a wake-up call. Someone with serious connections was determined to destroy her, and she needed to understand why. The forged documents were remarkably sophisticated, Adelaide Coker observed, settling into the leather chair that had once been Mama Ngozi's favorite. She'd become a daily presence since the grand opening, helping Amara navigate the treacherous waters of Lagos's power structure. This wasn't some amateur attempting blackmail. Any theories on who's behind it? Several. But first, there's something about your grandmother's past you need to understand. Adelaide opened a file box Amara had never seen before. Mama Ngozi didn't build her empire alone. She had partners, some legitimate, some less so. Amara felt a chill of apprehension. What kind of partners? The kind who expected to inherit portions of her wealth when she died. The kind who might feel cheated when they discovered everything went to a granddaughter they'd never met. The documents Adelaide spread across the desk painted a picture of her grandmother's business dealings that was far more complex than Amara had imagined. Joint ventures with politicians, shared investments with military officers, partnerships that had made everyone involved extraordinarily wealthy. She bought them out years ago, Amara said, studying the contracts. These partnerships were dissolved in the 1990s. Officially, yes. But some people never accepted that dissolution. They've been waiting 20 years for Mom and Ngozi to die so they could reclaim what they believed was theirs. And now they're discovering that the woman they thought was a powerless medical student is actually more formidable than her grandmother ever was. Adelaide smiled approvingly. The raid was a test, Amara. They wanted to see how you'd handle pressure. I passed. With flying colors. But that means the real attacks are about to begin. As if summoned by their conversation, Mrs. Olagoke's voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Okoro, you have visitors. Chief Emeka Okonkwo and General Yakubu are here to see you. Amara's blood ran cold. Chief Okonkwo was one of Nigeria's most powerful businessmen, with interests spanning oil, banking, and politics. General Yakubu was a former military ruler whose retirement had been more lucrative than most people's entire careers. Together, they represented the kind of old money power that could crush businesses and destroy lives with a phone call. Send them in, Amara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The two men who entered her grandmother's study carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to being the most dangerous figures in any room. Chief Okonkwo was elegantly dressed in traditional agbada, his presence filling the space like expensive cologne. General Yakubu wore a simple business suit, but his military bearing and cold eyes made him infinitely more intimidating. Little Amara. Chief Okonkwo's voice was warm, but his eyes were calculating. You've grown into a beautiful woman. Your grandmother would be proud. Chief Okonkwo. General Yakubu. Amara remained seated behind her grandmother's desk, using its massive presence as both shield and symbol of authority. Adelaide. Chief Okonkwo acknowledged her with a nod. Always the lawyer. But you see, some agreements transcend paperwork. Some partnerships are based on blood and brotherhood that can't be dissolved by mere contracts. What exactly are you claiming? Amara asked. Lagos can be dangerous for people who don't understand how power really works. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Amara felt the weight of her grandmother's pearl necklace against her throat, drawing strength from the symbol of a woman who had faced down men like these for 40 years. I appreciate your concern, she said carefully, but I'm managing quite well. Are you? Because from what we've seen, you're making the same mistakes your grandmother made, thinking you can play in our world without paying the proper respect to those who built it. Chief Okonkwo leaned forward, his friendly demeanor dropping away like a discarded mask. The construction permits, the federal investigation, these were gentle reminders, Amara. The next ones won't be so subtle. You were behind the raid? We were behind nothing. We simply know people. People who owe us favors. People who understand that Lagos society works best when everyone knows their place. Adelaide stood abruptly. Gentlemen, I think you've made your position clear. Perhaps it's time you heard ours. Adelaide, this doesn't concern. Doesn't it? Her voice cut through General Yakubu's dismissal like steel. Because I seem to remember a different version of history. I remember when Mama Ngozi saved both of your businesses from bankruptcy. I remember when she used her connections to keep you out of prison during the corruption investigations of '98. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. More importantly, Adelaide continued, I remember the insurance policies she took out on both of your lives. Policies that become very valuable if anything unfortunate happens to her family. Chief Okonkwo's composed facade cracked slightly. What insurance policies? The ones that mature for $50 million each upon your deaths, payable to whoever she designated as beneficiary. Adelaide's smile was glacial. Can you guess who that beneficiary might be? Amara stared at Adelaide in shock, but kept her expression carefully controlled. She had no idea whether such policies existed, but Adelaide's confidence suggested she wasn't bluffing. General Yakubu's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, then stopped as he remembered where he was. You're lying. Am I? Would you like me to call Lloyd's of London to verify? Or perhaps we should contact the private security firms that have been monitoring both of your movements for the past 5 years. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Finally, Chief Okonkwo stood, smoothing his agbada with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. This conversation is over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Amara replied, finding her voice. And gentlemen, the next time you want to discuss business with me, make an appointment through my secretary like everyone else. After they left, Adelaide sank back into her chair with a satisfied sigh. Your grandmother always said the best defense is a good bluff backed by just enough truth to make people nervous. Do those insurance policies actually exist? What do you think? Before Amara could answer, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Chaik. Something's happened. Kemi's in the hospital. They're saying she tried to kill herself. The ground seemed to shift beneath Amara's feet. Whatever game they'd all been playing, it had just become deadly serious. Adelaide, I have to go. Where? To clean up a mess I should have seen coming. As Amara grabbed her keys and headed for the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that Kemi's desperate act was connected to the visit she'd just received. In Lagos, coincidences were usually anything but coincidental. The question was whether she was already too late to prevent someone else from getting hurt. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because this story is about to reach its explosive climax. What do you think really happened to Kemi? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Lagos University Teaching Hospital's emergency ward buzzed with its usual chaos of ambulances, worried families, and overworked medical staff. Amara pushed through the crowded waiting area, her heart pounding as she searched for any sign of Chaik or information about Kemi's condition. Amara, Chaik's voice cut through the noise. She found him in a corner chair, his clothes wrinkled and his face haggard. Thank God you came. What happened? They found her in her hotel room this morning. Pills, alcohol, the whole desperate scene. His voice was hollow with guilt. She left notes. Multiple notes. What kind of notes? Chaik pulled out his phone, showing her a photo of handwritten pages. Confessions. About the embezzlement, the fake pregnancy, the affairs. But also accusations, Amara. About you, about your family, about things that could destroy everyone involved. Amara's blood chilled as she scanned the visible text. Kemi had documented everything, not just her own crimes, but wild allegations about Mom Ngozi's business practices, claims about Adelaide Coker's oil dealings, even speculation about political corruption reaching the highest levels of government. Where are the original notes? The police have them. But Amara, she gave copies to a journalist before she tried to. He couldn't finish the sentence. Which journalist? Tolu Ogundimu at The Guardian. He's been calling me all morning, asking for comments on the allegations. Tolu Ogundimu was Nigeria's most feared investigative reporter, known for bringing down politicians and business leaders with surgical precision. If he decided to run with Kemi's story, the fallout would destroy not just Amara's reputation, but potentially Adelaide's empire and several political careers. Has he published anything yet? Not yet. But he's scheduled a meeting for this afternoon to get my side of the story. A doctor approached them, her scrubs bearing the telltale signs of a long shift. Are you family of Ms. Adebayo? I'm her. Chaik struggled with the relationship. I'm her emergency contact. She's stable. The overdose wasn't as serious as it initially appeared, more of a cry for help than a genuine suicide attempt. But she's asking to speak with someone named Amara. Amara felt Chaik's eyes on her. That's me. She's quite agitated. She keeps saying she has something important to tell you before they find out she's alive. 20 minutes later, Amara sat beside Kemi's hospital bed in a private room that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Kemi looked fragile beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, her usually immaculate appearance replaced by hospital gowns and the pallor of someone who'd stared death in the face. "You came," Kemi whispered, her voice hoarse from the charcoal treatment. "I came. I didn't really want to die, you know. I didn't know how to stop the lying." Amara pulled her chair closer to the bed. "What lies, Kemi?" "All of them. The pregnancy, the embezzlement, but those weren't the worst ones." Kemi's eyes filled with tears. "The worst lies were the ones they made me tell about you." "Who made you?" "Chief Okonkwo. General Yakubu. They approached me 6 months ago, before I ever met Chike. They knew I worked at Goldstein Properties, knew I had access to your grandmother's old files. I didn't know about your inheritance then." Kemi laughed bitterly. "Imagine my shock when I discovered I'd been working for you all along." "What about the journalist? The confession letters?" "They told me to write them. Said if I didn't, they'd make sure I had an accident before I could expose their real plan." Kemi gripped Amara's hand with surprising strength. "But I made copies, Amara. Real copies that tell the truth about what they're really after." "What are they really after?" "Your grandmother's offshore accounts. The ones in Switzerland and Dubai that even Adelaide doesn't know about. They think if they can destroy your reputation and force you into bankruptcy, those accounts will revert to them as the original partners." Amara felt the room spinning. "What offshore accounts?" "The ones worth another $100 million. The ones your grandmother used to fund liberation movements across Africa in the 1980s. Kemi's voice was getting weaker, but her urgency was clear. She wasn't just building wealth, Amara. She was building freedom. Before Amara could respond, the room's door burst open. Chief Okonkwo strode in, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits who clearly weren't hospital staff. "I'm sure she was. But I wonder if she mentioned our business arrangement? The one where she agreed to help us resolve some outstanding issues with her former employer?" "I told her everything," Kemi said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "About the plan, the offshore accounts, all of it." Chief Okonkwo's friendly mask slipped completely. "That was very foolish, Ms. Adebayo." "Was it?" "Because I also told Tolu Ogundamu. The real story, not the lies you wanted me to spread." Kemi pulled a small recording device from beneath her pillow. "Including this conversation." The cavalry had arrived, summoned by a silent alarm Amara had activated when Chief Okonkwo first appeared. "Chief Okonkwo," the lead officer said formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted intimidation of witnesses, and trespassing in a medical facility." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Chief Okonkwo's eyes burned with rage and promises of future vengeance. "This isn't over, little girl. You have no idea what forces you're playing with." "Actually, I do," Amara replied calmly. "I'm playing with the same forces that built this country, the forces of justice, truth, and consequences for those who think they're above both." After the police had taken their statements and the press had gotten their photos, Amara found herself alone with Kemi again. The woman who had tried to destroy her marriage looked smaller now, diminished by the weight of her choices. "What happens now?" Kemi asked. "Now you recover. Then you testify. Then you start over, for real this time, with the truth instead of lies." "And Chike?" Amara looked through the window at her estranged husband, who sat in the waiting area with his head in his hands. "That remains to be seen. Do you think you can forgive him? For what he did, what we did?" "I think forgiveness isn't something you give because someone deserves it," Amara said slowly. "It's something you give because you deserve to be free from carrying their mistakes." As she left the hospital, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from Adelaide. "Phase 1 complete. Are you ready for Phase 2? She looked back at the building where her son's father sat contemplating the ruins of his choices, then forward to the Lagos skyline where her grandmother's empire waited to be fully claimed. "Yes," she typed back. "I'm ready." But ready for what, exactly? Adelaide's messages were always cryptic, and Amara was beginning to suspect that her grandmother's oldest friend had been planning this moment far longer than she'd admitted. The real question was whether Amara was prepared for whatever came next. "We're almost at the end of this incredible journey. What do you think Adelaide has planned for Phase 2? Drop your predictions in the comments and make sure you're subscribed because the finale is going to be absolutely explosive. 6 months later, the ballroom of the Eco Hotel and Suites glittered with the cream of Lagos society gathered for the most anticipated event of the social season, the inaugural Ngozi Okafor Foundation Gala. Amara moved through the crowd with the grace of someone who had fully grown into her power, accepting congratulations on the foundation's launch while Emeka, now walking and charming everyone he met, held court in his miniature tuxedo. The foundation's mission, providing microloans and business education to women across Nigeria, had captured the imagination of both local and international donors. Tonight's gala was projected to raise over 200 million naira, but for Amara, the real victory was more personal. Mama Amara, Mrs. Okafor approached with tears in her eyes. Mama Ngozi is dancing with joy tonight. This is exactly what she would have wanted. I hope so, Amara replied, adjusting the emerald necklace that had become her signature piece. She left very specific instructions about using wealth to build more wealth for others. Across the ballroom, Adelaide Coker held court with international investors, her silver hair catching the light as she gestured toward the foundation's display boards. The offshore accounts Kemi had mentioned had indeed existed, and their contents had provided the foundation's initial funding while ensuring Mama Ngozi's true legacy would continue for generations. Mrs. Okoro? A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find Tolu Ogundimu, the journalist whose investigation had ultimately brought down Chief Okonkwo's entire network. Could I have a moment? Of course. I wanted you to know. The appeals court upheld all the convictions today. Chief Okonkwo and General Yakubu will serve their full sentences. 20 years each for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted extortion. And Kemi? 2 years suspended sentence plus community service. She's actually doing quite well, started her own small architectural firm in Abuja. Seems like facing the truth was exactly what she needed. Amara nodded, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Justice had been served, but more importantly, everyone involved had found a path forward. There's something else, Tolu continued. My investigation uncovered documents showing that your grandmother funded dozens of liberation movements across Africa. Not just Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa during apartheid. Her money helped train doctors, build schools, and support leaders who changed the continent. She never mentioned any of that in her letters. Some legacies are too important to trust to words. They have to be lived. Tolu smiled. Which brings me to my real question. Are you ready to step into that larger role? Before Amara could ask what he meant, the evening's master of ceremonies called for attention. But instead of Adelaide or one of the foundation's board members taking the stage, a video screen descended from the ceiling. What about Chike? What about him? She spotted her husband, legally still her husband, though they'd been separated throughout the legal proceedings, standing near the foundation's display with their son's nanny. He'd spent the last 6 months rebuilding his business and his reputation, proving that people could change when properly motivated. Has he earned redemption? That's not for me to decide, Adelaide said gently. The question is whether you're ready to build something bigger than the pain he caused. As if sensing her gaze, Chike looked up and caught her eye across the crowded room. He raised his glass slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed respect, regret, and hope all at once. Ladies and gentlemen, Adelaide's voice carried across the ballroom as she took the stage. It is my honor to present the president and CEO of the Ngozi Okafor Foundation, Mrs. Amara Okoro. The applause was thunderous as Amara made her way to the podium, Emeka still in her arms. Looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar from Lagos society, others new allies from across the continent, she felt her grandmother's presence as strongly as if Mama Ngozi were standing beside her. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice clear and strong. My grandmother used to say that the greatest inheritance you can leave someone is not money, but the knowledge of how to earn it. Tonight, we begin ensuring that every woman in Africa has access to that knowledge. The crowd erupted in approval, but Amara's eyes found Chike in the audience. He was applauding too, but his expression held something deeper, understanding, perhaps of what he had almost destroyed and what she had chosen to build instead. Some of you knew me 6 months ago as the wife who was abandoned during childbirth, she continued, her voice growing stronger. Tonight, you know me as the granddaughter of Ngozi Okafor and the mother of the next generation. But most importantly, I hope you'll know me as a woman who learned that our greatest strength lies not in what we can tear down, but in what we choose to build up. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Chaik approached slowly, uncertainty written across his features. Congratulations, he said quietly. On everything. The foundation, the convictions, finding the truth about your grandmother. Thank you. Amara, I know I don't have the right to ask, but you want to know if there's a place for you in this new life I'm building. Is there? She looked at Emeka, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, then back at the man who had fathered him. I think that depends on what kind of man you're planning to be going forward. The kind who deserves to be this little boy's father. The kind who earns the respect of his wife instead of demanding it. The kind who builds things up instead of tearing them down. Those are good goals, Chaik. The question is whether you can achieve them. I'd like the chance to try. If you'll let me. Amara studied his face, seeing echoes of the man she'd fallen in love with years ago beneath the wear of hard-learned lessons. We'll start with co-parenting, she said finally. Equal time, equal responsibility, equal respect. If you can handle that. We'll see what comes next. We'll see. As they stood together in the emptying ballroom, their son sleeping peacefully between them, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Not quite forgiveness, not yet trust, but possibility. The foundation would change thousands of lives across Africa. The legal victories had brought justice for her grandmother's memory. And perhaps if they both worked at it, they could build something new from the ashes of their old marriage. But even if they couldn't, Amara knew she would be fine. She had her son, her grandmother's legacy, and the knowledge that she was strong enough to face whatever came next. Some stories end with revenge. Others end with redemption. The best ones, Amara thought as she looked around her grandmother's empire, end with new beginnings. Ready to go home?
Chaik asked.
Yes, she replied, adjusting Emeka in her arms. We're ready. As they walked out of the ballroom together, not as husband and wife, but as parents committed to building something better for their son, Amara felt Mama Ngozi's presence one last time, warm and proud and finally at peace. The revolution her grandmother had dreamed of was just beginning, and Amara Okaro, once powerless and abandoned, was ready to lead it.